Welcome to the 7th video in this beginner's guide to Adobe After Effects. So in this tutorial, I'm going to introduce you to the key animation principles in After Effects. So we'll get into it. So here I am in After Effects, and I have a project open here demonstrating the key animation principles in After Effects. So in After Effects, there are 4 key principles: position, scale, rotation, and opacity. So when it comes to animating in After Effects, you will likely use one of these principles, or even all of them. But you'll usually use multiple animations on one media type. So what you will come to learn as you use After Effects more and more is, as you build your video presentations and start to animate your media content and create transitions, they're all going to utilize these 4 principles in one way or another. So this is a composition that I've put together to help you understand how animation works in After Effects, how it's applied by using these 4 principles. Now, After Effects animation is applied to our media elements down in the timeline panel. Okay, so right now I'm in preview mode. So I can just press the space bar to stop this for now. Now, if we come into the timeline panel below, we can see the shape layers that are animating in the visual composition panel above. And now we can tell they're shape layers because of the icon next to them. In After Effects, a shape layer is represented with a star. And in this instance, the layer bar colors are set to purple. So first, I'm going to click on the top layer bar called Position. So notice when the layer is selected, the object is also selected in the composition panel above. So now I'll come over to the left in the timeline panel by the file name, and I will carefully click the arrow next to the colored square. So this will drop down the properties for this layer here. All right, so initially we can see content and transform. Now this time I'm going to carefully click on the drop-down arrow for transform, and now we can see the animation properties for this layer. So from the top we have anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity. Now it's very important to note here that whatever media type you place into your composition, you're always going to have these transform options, because this is where animation is applied to layers in After Effects. As a beginner, you're going to need to familiarize yourself with these transform options and what these terms are and what they will do, because we'll be working with these very soon and very often as we progress throughout the course. So I just want you to notice that on this layer, we can have these keyframes set, and they're set for the position property. So in other words, we can see the stopwatch over on the left is blue, and we can see some keyframes adjacent to this over in the timeline. Now notice we have no other property set here, just the position. So next I'll scroll down and select the scale layer, and here I'll do the same. So I'll click the arrow to the left of the name to toggle the properties down, and again I'll click the toggle transform down. So this time we can see that for this layer we only have scale keyframes applied. All right, so I'll do the same for the rotation layer. Again, just rotation keyframes applied. And lastly, on the opacity layer, again, opacity keyframes applied. So in other words, for each shape layer here in the timeline, I've only applied one animation principle. All right, so now we can see just the bars in the timeline panel, and whew, all right, that was a lot to look at all at once. So I'm going to drag my time indicator to the far left, in fact, to the start of the timeline, and press the space bar. Okay, so this begins the preview, and we can now watch how they animate. So this is how animation is done in After Effects. Okay, so now if I click on the top layer bar, hold Shift and click the bottom purple layer, when I do that, I select them all. And notice that they are also selected here in the composition panel above. So now with all the layers selected in my timeline panel, I'm going to simply press U on the keyboard. So this keyboard shortcut will expand the layers, but only reveal the shapes below. And if we look carefully, we can see that they are adjacent to each animation property applied to each layer on the left in the timeline panel. So now these shapes are called keyframes, and these keyframes are what sets the parameters for all the effects over time. Now, before we move on, there are a few more details that I want you to know about with keyframes. But to recap, the key things to remember here are the 4 key animation principles in After Effects. And these are position, scale, rotation, and opacity. Animations in After Effects use one or all of these principles, and the animation is set in the transform properties in the timeline panel. Okay, my friends, so if you want to, we can take a short break here. But in the next video, we're going to be taking a closer look at keyframes. We're going to learn more about them, how they work, and how they're managed over time. All right? So I'll see you in the next video.